Prior to tonight's meeting, we'll have a student-led reflection. That reflection will be led by Bailey Raynard, an 8th grader at Albert Cammon Middle School. After Mr. Raynard leads us in the reflection, we'll have Mr. Sonny Savoy lead us in the pledge. So if you stand, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Bailey Raynard, and I'm an 8th grader at Albert Cammon Middle School. Loving and gracious God, you are indeed the giver of all good gifts, and we thank you today for all of your blessings, for the successful outcomes of our school events, and for all of our staff members, both the teaching and support members. We ask that you bless them abundantly, and we continue to seek your guidance, wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations, and help us to be wise in the decisions we make for those who have all placed their trust, confidence, in our leadership. Give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Keep us from short-sightedness and pettiness. Help us to make decisions that are for the good of all, and guard us from blind self-interest. Dear Lord, grant us with the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. All glory be to you, loving God, now and always through Christ and the Holy Spirit forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much.
Bailey, I want to thank you for that reflection you read for us tonight. Bailey is, as I mentioned, Bailey's an 8th grader, getting ready to finish Albert Cammon and move on to Destrehan, and he was involved in our inaugural season as a soccer player over at Cammon. So best of luck to you the rest of the year, and look forward to seeing you over at Destrehan. Thank you. Call a board meeting for April 24th, 2019 order. Madam Secretary, please let the record show that all board members are here except for Mr. Smith, along with our superintendent, Ms. Felicia Gomez-Walker, and our executive secretary for board and superintendent, Ms. Shelley Babineau. I'd like to take this opportunity to also, if the audience would join me in congratulating or celebrating our secretaries for Secretary Day, which includes our wonderful executive secretary. So, okay, first item on the agenda is 2.01, 2019 National School Nurse Week Proclamation. And I would ask Mr. Robichaux if he would read that, please.
My pleasure. The National School Nurses Week Proclamation. Whereas it is important that we recognize the efforts of school nurses and their association with the students of our schools. And whereas we acknowledge the care and contributions being made to the overall development of our children by school nurses. And whereas we express our gratitude and appreciation for the expertise of school nurses in our school environment and acknowledge their vital role as professionals. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the St. Charles Parish School Board, in conjunction with the National Education Association, hereby proclaim May 6th through May 12th, 2019, as School Nurse Week in the St. Charles Parish Public School System, and I move its approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Robichaux, second by Mr. Savoy. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'd like to invite the superintendent if she wants to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Nakam. Thank you, nurses, for everything that you do, for taking care of the headaches, the stomach aches, the bobos, and even when students go to because they want a little extra attention. We thank you for giving them that as well. You are a vital part of our school system for the health and well-being of our students. So thank you so much. I would like to invite Ms. Jerry Smith, the Executive Director of Student Services, to come up and introduce our wonderful nurses.
Good evening, Superintendent Gomez-Walker and board members, and thank you so much for this opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge and honor our phenomenal school nurses. Just briefly, the 2019 School Nurses Day theme this year is School Nurses Making the Grade on School Health. This theme recognizes that school nurses play an integral part in the health of not just students, but the overall learning environment of our students. It is an incredible honor for me to recognize and celebrate the contributions to student health, teaching, and learning that our school nurses make every day. Because of our school nurses optimizing student health and learning, students in St. Charles Parish Public Schools have the opportunity to fully access the education available to them. It gives me great pleasure to thank you and to acknowledge those who are present tonight. When I call your name, please come up front for a photo. Ms. Erilyn Honor, Ms. Melissa Bird, Ms. Jessica Hanneman, Ms. Marcy Hunter, Ms. Jamie Bird, Ms. Jan Perilou, Ms. Chrissy Rockefeller, Ms. Nicole Schulin, Ms. Melissa Schexnayder, and Ms. Sonia Robinson.
Okay, at this time, I'll ask for board vote. Madam Secretary, for the record, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is 2.02, resolution for sales and use tax collection and administration. I'd ask Mr. Suffren if you would read that, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sales and use tax collection and administration resolution. Whereas Article 7, Section 3 of the Louisiana Constitution provides that local sales and use taxes are to be collected by a single collector in each parish. And whereas Article 7, Section 3 also provides for the use of a parish commission or one of the local political subdivisions to serve as a single parish collector of local sales and use taxes. And whereas the authority to collect local sales and use taxes has been determined by the courts to include the authority to administer the collection, including making decisions as to when to audit persons or businesses thought to be unlawfully evading taxation, or in some cases, collecting sales taxes on transactions and failing to fully remit them to the local collector. And whereas school boards serve as the single parish collector of local sales and use taxes in over 30 parishes, and whereas pre-filed in the 2019 regular session is HB 57, which proposes to amend the Louisiana Constitution to allow the legislature to repeal the authority of local governments to control the collection of local sales taxes and place that authority with the state, a concept often referred to as state central collection. And whereas state central collection would have the state taking possession of local tax revenues, withholding an administrative fee, then dispersing the balance down to the school board or other local taxing authority. And whereas state central collection poses too great a risk that local education tax dollars would not be promptly dispersed, or that the administrative fee withheld by the state may become a means of resolving state fiscal issues. And whereas repealing or diminishing the constitutional authority for local collection of local sales tax and use taxes will impair the ability of these local collectors to perform the necessary function of auditing vendors to ensure compliance with the legal obligation to collect and remit local sales taxes. And whereas given the vital role that the proper, effective, and efficient collection of local sales and use taxes plays in the operation of school districts and the education of children, the Louisiana School Boards Association has always fought any efforts to repeal, reduce, or constrain the authority of the local collector to collect local sales and use taxes, regardless of who has offered the proposal. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the St. Charles Parish School District, by action of its duly elected governing authority, does hereby urge and request the Louisiana Legislature, and in particular, the legislative delegation of St. Charles Parish, to oppose HB 57 and any other legislative effort to reject any proposal to repeal or impair local sales and use taxes. Be it further resolved that the St. Charles Parish School District, by action of its duly elected governing authority, does hereby urge and request the Louisiana Legislature, and in particular, the legislative delegation of St. Charles Parish, to reject any proposal that repeals, reduces, or constrains the authority of the local collector to collect local sales and use taxes. Finally, be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be provided to each member of the legislative delegation of St. Charles Parish and the governor of the state of Louisiana. And I move for adoption of this resolution.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Suffren, second by Mr. O'Quinn. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, please note for the record that that motion passes unanimously. And next item on the agenda is 3.01, Board and Superintendent recognitions. I'll make a quick comment before we do the recognitions. Once the recognitions are completed, the board will take about a 2-minute break to allow those who wish to leave to do so. You're certainly welcome to stay for the business portion of our meeting, though.
Hahnville High School students were named individual district wrestling champions. Donald Turner. And Ethan Dixon. Hahnville High School student was selected to the 7-5A All-Defensive Basketball Team. Corey Joseph. Hahnville High School students were selected to the All-District Soccer First Team. Ashlyn Hooper. Zoe Terrio. And Paxton Maneri, who was also selected to the composite academic all-state soccer team. Hahnville High School student was selected to the Composite Academic All-State Tennis Team. Rachel Yu. Hahnville High School student was selected to the Composite Academic All-State Golf Team and is the Chick-fil-A Cup Championship winner. Shelby Walls.
Once again, I'd like to congratulate all of our recipients tonight for being pace setters, student-athlete pace setters. And I encourage you to continue what you're doing and encourage your fellow students and your fellow athletes to model themselves after what you've done and what you're doing for the district. So thank you very much, and at this time, we're going to take a break. Yeah. I'd like to call St. Charles Parish School Board meeting for April 24th back to order. At this time, we'll take up business items. Next item on the agenda is 4.01, minutes for March 18th, 2019 committee meeting, March 20th, 2019 board meeting, and March 22nd, 2019 board retreat. Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Robichaux, second by Mrs. Bernard. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, please cast your vote. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Madam Secretary, please note for the record that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is 4.02, expulsion appeal of student number 1. As per Louisiana Revised Statute 17:416C 3B4, the school board may review expulsion decisions and choose to affirm, reverse, or modify the actions previously taken by the superintendent or the superintendent's designee. The members of the St. Charles Parish School Board met as an ad hoc committee on Tuesday, April 23, 2019, at the request of student number 1's parent to consider her request of the board to review the decision to expel student number 1 and the resulting sanctions. The members of the St. Charles Parish School Board need to consider and then act upon the recommendations of its ad hoc committee.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the recommendation from the ad hoc committee to affirm the expulsion and sanctions of student number 1.
Okay, got a motion by Mr. Savoy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Mr. O'Quinn. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, please cast your vote. Is it froze up?
I voted too, Ben.
I voted. Okay, it seems like we're experiencing some technical difficulties, so all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have one nay and 6 yes, so by majority vote, that motion passes. Oh, there it is. Okay, by a 6-to-1 vote, that motion passes to affirm the superintendent's ad hoc committee's recommendation to affirm the sanctions applied to student number 1. Okay. Next item on the agenda is Executive Director of Equity and Student Support position.
Mr. President, I move that we remand this item back to administration. Oh, Mr. President, I move that we remand this item to the administration.
Okay, got a motion by Mr. Savoy to remand this item back to administration because this item was tabled at the committee meeting last night. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Mrs. Bernard. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
Still not coming in.
Did you say you can't have discussion once you make a motion?
Okay, Madam Secretary, that motion to table and remand this back to administration passes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Next item on the agenda is personnel items. This agenda item was reviewed at the Personnel and Policy Committee meeting of the Board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is aligned with Goal B of the Board's strategic plan. Do I
Mr.
have-
President, I move that we approve the personnel items as presented by the superintendent and staff at Tuesday's board meeting.
Motion by Mr. Savoy,
I'll second.
second by Mr. O'Quinn. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, please cast your vote. Okay, Madam Secretary, personnel items have been approved unanimously by the Board.
Dog, I did it again.
Okay, item 4.05, resolution granting preliminary approval for the issuance of sales tax bonds not to exceed $15 million.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the resolution granting preliminary approval for the issuance of sales tax bonds not to exceed $15 million.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Suffren, second by Mr. O'Quinn. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, I would like to ask Mr. Hugh Martin, our longtime bond counsel, to come up and maybe speak to the fact that we came into these bonds. I think we paid off, we had some bonds that expired, and so now we can go out for a new bond issue.
Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure coming here to see a school system that runs so well and that looks so great. And with the addition of the performing arts facility now, that just that's the crown of everything. It's wonderful. Congratulations to you. The resolution before you would represent the beginning of the procedure which is necessary to be taken in issuing the $15 million of bonds, sales tax bonds. There was a 1% sales tax voted by the people on May 13, 1978, and it's been in effect since that time, proceeds of which were used for capital improvements over the year. The last borrowing which was made payable from that source was paid off in February of this year. So you have a tax that's not obligated by bonds, but you can still use cash. So the important thing to note here is that there's no tax increase which will be incurred by the issuance of these bonds using the same sales tax which was previously issued. The resolution is somewhat a standard one for this stage of development of a building repair program. It authorizes the issuance of the $15 million of bonds. It authorizes also the application to the State Bond Commission and furnishing of necessary documents in order to get their approval for the issuance of the bond, which is required by law. It also takes care of some household duties that are required in issuing these bonds. It provides for the employment of our firm as bond counsel. I think the first time I did this for you all, I was not lead counsel, but I was a young lawyer was somewhere around 1964, maybe 63. It's been a while. But anyway, the employment must be improved by the Attorney General, which must approve the fee schedule also. Also authorized by the adoption of the resolution is the underwriter to serve for the sale of the bonds and provide advice to the board. Our firm does not provide you with financial advice. We provide you with legal matters relating to the issuance of the bond, factual matters about the issuance also, but we don't give the financial advice. That is done by Stiefel, will be done in this case by the appointment of Stiefel, Nicholas and Company. Also in connection with financial advice is the appointment of a municipal advisor, financial advisor. And that is also a requirement now in most cases in law. There are some exceptions, but in this case, you're required to have one. And the resolution would provide for the appointment of Argent Advisors of Ruston, Louisiana. The resolution also has a provision for reimbursement from bond proceeds for work you might start before the bonds are actually issued. If you adopt this resolution the way it is, and you want to start some project immediately and have the cash to do it, you can begin the project from the cash, and when the bonds are actually delivered later on this year, reimburse the yourselves from the bond proceeds for the amount expended. And those are the main things which the resolution provides for. If any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
So just to clarify, we're expecting the bonds to be delivered, I think, in August. We can actually begin projects prior to that date.
That's correct. And making expenditures. Things like, for instance, hiring architects, if you need to, contracts for soil borings and things of that nature, or really any purpose that's part of the construction. That's correct. It can be done.
Okay.
I have a question. Mr. Martin, do you have any idea what the interest rate and the length of the term of this issuance
The term will
might be?
probably be 15 years. Again, we get into financial advice there, but we can just tell you factually that if you look out across the plain, that's what many people are borrowing, 15 and 20 years, although rates are all lower. And if it's actually necessary to get more money so you can do that by going further, it's still economical to do so, but not as economical as borrowing for 15 years. But that's, in all probability, will be 15 years.
And what about the interest rate, a ballpark?
Interest rates would be below 4%, maybe 3.5%, but they're subject to change, could change tomorrow. But the Feds seem to have pulled back on that policy which they had undertaken earlier in the year to increasing interest rates. They've gone back to not doing that and keeping rates lower. So I don't expect them to go up.
Okay, thank you.
But they could.
Thank you.
And I know with the approval of this resolution, the board and administration have begun some preliminary talks as to where how we'll use these bonds. And right now, the focus is going to be on long-range long-range capital improvements.
Right.
Air conditioning units,
Tax is
roofs.
dedicated for that purpose.
Right.
Capital
Yeah.
improvement. And it's Well, that's what the purpose of the bond proceeds to be used for.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions?
Thank you for being here, Mr. Martin, and thank you so much for your valuable counsel over the years, many years.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. Yep.
Thanks a lot, I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing this one come to a good conclusion.
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, any other discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
You gotta be careful how you get out of this thing, 'cause you get out here.
Madam Secretary, item 4.05 passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, board members of Dr. Rodney R. LaFont Performing Arts Center Endowment Fund. The board approved a resolution for shell sponsorship of the Dr. Rodney R. LaFont Performing Arts Center Endowment Fund at the November 14, 2018 board meeting. As the overseeing custodian of the endowment fund, the St. Charles Parish School Board must approve the appointment of the initial board members as follows. First, Mr. Alex Suffren, Chairman of the Finance Committee, St. Charles Parish School Board, to serve a 3-year term. Second is Rochelle Touchard, Shell Representative, serve a 2-year term. Third is Mr. Robert Fisher, talented teacher, Destrehan High School, a 2-year term. Number 4 is Stephanie Gullich, gifted teacher at R.K. Smith Middle School, a 1-year term. Fifth is Rosemary Sanders, a retired teacher, a 1-year term. And the 6th is the current school board president, to serve a 1-year term. Serving as ex officio non-voting members will be Director of Gifted and Talented Arts, the Director of Performance Arts Center, the Superintendent, and the School Board Vice President. This agenda item was reviewed at the Finance and Audit Committee of the meeting of the board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is aligned with Goal C of the board's strategic plan.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Robichaud, second by Mr. Suffren. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This is a ratification of these appointments that were made sometime late last year, either November or December.
November 14th,
Okay,
2018. Yes, sir.
This is ratifying those terms. For instance, the 1-year term will expire in the fall of this year. What's going to happen with the 2 appointments that we added to this resolution? When does those terms begin?
The term for
Tonight?
the term for the school board president, which was added tonight, will end at January 1st. Okay, and the school board vice president will move up and assume that school board president term, and then the incoming vice president will assume the ex officio non-voting member.
Okay. So
Okay, and those 2 positions will continue to roll over and actually allow school board executive, somebody from the executive committee to serve at least 2 years. One is a non-voting, one is a voting.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Okay? Good. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, 4.07, schedule of school board meetings for school year 2019-2020. Administration is requesting adoption of the schedule of the 2019-2020 board meetings during the month of April in order to allow the school adequate time in planning their calendars. Expeditious adoption of the schedule of the board meetings will allow for the setting of advertising and bidding dates on new projects and additions to buildings being transacted in a timely fashion. Also, this will permit the development of school system calendars and will further our efforts in communicating board activities to the public. This agenda item was reviewed at the Personnel and Policy Committee meeting of the board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019.
I'll move adoption of the schedule of the board meetings for June 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Got a motion by Mrs. Bernard, second by Mr. Savoy. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 4.08, proposal acceptance, emergency construction of building components and/or grounds. The district's hurricane disaster preparedness and recovery plan includes a recommendation by FEMA to refine the manner in which emergency work is provided after the district declares an emergency. Proposals for emergency construction of building components and/or grounds enables the district to expedite the recovery of funds following the emergency. 2 proposals for emergency construction of building components and/or grounds were received on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. This agenda item reviewed at the Capital Improvements Committee meeting of the Board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is aligned with Goal D of the Board's strategic plan.
Mr. President, I move that we accept a proposal from Fricky Brothers Incorporated for emergency construction of building components and/or grounds, and hopefully we won't need them.
Hopefully we won't. Got a motion by Mr. Savoy. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second by Mr. O'Quinn. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, that item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 4.09, proposal acceptance, emergency janitorial and restoration services. The district's hurricane disaster preparedness and recovery plan includes a recommendation by FEMA to refine the manner in which emergency work is provided after a district declared emergency. Proposals for emergency janitorial and restoration services enable the district to expedite the recovery of funds following the emergency. 2 proposals for emergency janitorial and restoration services were received on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. This agenda item was reviewed at the Capital Improvements Committee meeting of the Board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is aligned with Goal D of the Board's strategic plan.
Mr. President, I move that we accept a proposal from Quality Janitorial and Restoration Service, LLC, for emergency janitorial and restoration services.
Second?
Got a motion by Mr. Suffern, second by Mrs. Bernard. Is there any discussion? Again, hearing none, please cast your vote. That motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, 4.10, proposal acceptance, hardware repair service. Proposals were received from 2 vendors for hardware repair services on Monday, April 1st, 2019. Proposals were reviewed and evaluated by a committee. After scoring the proposals, Bellwether Technology is a recommended vendor. The contract is for a 5-year period. This item was reviewed at the Technology Committee meeting of the Board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is aligned with Goal C of the Board's strategic plan.
Mr. President, I move that we accept a proposal from Bellwether Technology for hardware repair services.
Got a motion by Mr. O'Quinn,
Second.
second by Mr. Alexander. For the record, the cost on this contract, it's a 5-year contract. I'm sorry, Madam Secretary, you blocked my view. Okay. Year 1 contract is $382,000. Year 2, $389,000. Year 3, $400,000. Year 4, $408,000. And year 5, $416,000. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, item 4.10 passes. Okay, next item on the agenda is 4.11, revised budget fiscal year 2019. The Board approved the budget for each of the various funds on June 20th, 2018. The Finance and Audit Committee met on April 23rd, 2019, and requested the general fund budget to be revised to reflect a one-time payment of $1,000 for all full-time district employees and $500 for all permanent part-time employees. The payment will be distributed to employees hired prior to January 1st, 2019, as a separate payment on the May 2019 payroll. The cost of the one-time payment is $2,200,000 and is reflected in the budget revision. It is necessary to revise the budget to reflect a one-time payment to be distributed in May. State law, Louisiana Revised Statute 39:13.10, mandates that a budget be revised when a variance of 5% or more occurs between operational expenditures and budgeting estimates. Prudent fiscal planning mandates periodic review and revisions of the budget for each fund. This agenda item was reviewed at the Finance and Audit Committee of the Board on Tuesday, April 23rd, and is in line with Goal C of the Board's strategic plan.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the revised general fund balance to reflect the one-time payment for all employees hired prior to January 1st, 2019, and the special revenue funds, debt service funds, capital projects, and lunch fund budgets as presented.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Suffern, second by Mr. Robichaud. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Okay, Madam Secretary, the revised budget for fiscal year 2019 passes. Next item on the agenda is 4.12, accounts payable for the month of March 2019. Invoices and other financial obligations of the school district are customarily paid weekly. Request for approval of these transactions is normally made to the board monthly. The board must approve expenditures of public funds under its jurisdiction. This agenda item was reviewed at the Finance and Audit Committee of the committee meeting of the board on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019, and is in line with Goal C of the board's strategic plan.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the accounts payable for the month of March 2019 in the total amount of $2,185,337.97.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Suffern, second by Mr. Savoy. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, item 4.12 passes. Okay, that concludes the business portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move into closing items. At this time, any chairman of the standing committee who wishes to give their report, please do so now.
Mr. President, last night, April 23rd, the Transportation Committee met. We had one item on the agenda, which was a minor restructuring of the Transportation Department, and that item was approved. And Mr. President, if there's no objection, I'd like to thank some people who made donations for the Ellis Marcellus Trio to perform at the opening of the Performing Arts Center earlier this month.
Okay, I'm not hearing any objections to that. Mr. Alexander, so go ahead.
Okay, I'd just like to recognize 10 people that made donations to cover the expenses of the Ellis Marcellus Trio. And number one, Mr. Robin Durant, the District Attorney Joe Shashon, our Assessor, Mr. Tab Troxler, Mr. and Mrs. Danny Hebert, State Representative Greg Miller, my wife, Mrs. Christine Alexander, Mr. Joey Murray, Mr. Gary Smith Sr., the Sheriff Greg Champagne, and Mrs. Paula Johnson. I really appreciate the donation to make that event possible. Thank you, Mr. President, for that privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. We certainly appreciate the support we get from our communities in that endeavor. So greatly appreciate it.
Mr. President, the Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Committee met on Tuesday, April the 23rd. We had one item on our agenda. It was for committee meeting only, and that was a presentation from Mr. Pethe regarding the Science Instructional Resources adoption for the upcoming school year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard.
Mr. President, the Finance and Audit Committee met on Tuesday, April 23rd, and covered 6 items. 5 of the 6 items came to the full board during this meeting and were approved. Those 5 items were the resolution for sales and use tax collection and administration, the resolution granting preliminary approval for the issuance of sales tax bonds not to exceed $15 million. The ratification of the board members for the Dr. Rodney Orlifant Performing Arts Center Endowment Fund, revised budget for fiscal year 2019, and accounts payable for the month of March 2019. The other item was for committee discussion only, and that involved the selection of the underwriter and the municipal advisor for the 2019 sales tax bonds. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Suffren.
Mr. President, the Policy and Personnel Committee met last night, had a board committee meeting, and we had 2 items on the agenda. One of the personnel items, which we dealt with tonight, and also we remanded back to the superintendent, the executive director of equity and student support position. And so that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Savoy.
Mr. President, the Technology Committee met last night on Tuesday, April 23rd, and we met to discuss the hardware repair services, and that was brought to the board table tonight, and it was approved.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Oakwin. The Capital Improvements Committee met. We had 3 items on the agenda, 2 of which came to the board table tonight. 1 was for committee only. The 2 items that came to the board table were the proposal acceptance for emergency construction of building components in our grounds. The second one was proposal acceptance for emergency janitorial services, restoration services. Both of those items were approved by the board tonight. The third item was proposed parish property developments, and that was a committee item only that Mr. Rome reviewed with the board about different developments that are going on throughout the parish. So, and that concludes my report. From there, we'll ask the superintendent if she would prepare her report or give her report.
Thank you, Mr. Narkamp. Tonight, I'd certainly like to acknowledge the fact that our student athletes are excelling. In regards to softball, the Hahnville High School Lady Tigers finished the regular season with a record of 23-9, 23 wins, 9 losses, and were crowned the district 7-5A champions. They entered the state playoffs ranked number 12 in the state, but were defeated by Washita in the second round of the playoffs. The Destrehan High School Lady Cats compiled a regular season record of 14-16, and they entered the playoffs, were defeated by Airline in the third round of the playoffs. Congratulations to both softball teams. For baseball, Destrehan High School ended its regular season at 21-9 with that record, and the Wildcats entered the playoffs ranked 10th and defeated Washita. They will move on to the second round of the playoffs to face Sanoma, and their first game will be on Friday at home at Destrehan High School at 4 o'clock. Hahnville High School posted a 13-17 regular season record and were defeated by Live Oak High School in the first round of the playoffs. On to track. The Hahnville High School boys were crowned the 7-5A district champions, while the Hahnville High School girls placed second in the district. Both high school track teams will compete in the regionals and with hopes to qualify for the state meet during the first week of May. On to tennis. Hahnville High School boys were crowned the district champs, and members of both Hahnville and Destrehan qualified to compete in the state tennis tournament. Not over yet. Golf. Both high school golf teams competed in the regional golf tournament, and members have qualified to play in the state golf tournament next week. Athletics is well represented in our AAA district. Next, academics, graduations. Hahnville High School graduation will be held on Wednesday, May 15th, 2019 at 6 p.m. and Destrehan High School graduation will be held on Thursday, May 16th at 7 p.m. Both graduations will be held at the Pontchartrain Center on Williams Boulevard in Kenner, Louisiana. And congratulations to all of our seniors. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Gomez Walker. That concludes our closing items, tonight's meeting.
Move adjourn.
Got a motion by Mr. Robichaud,
Second?
second by Mrs. Bernard. All those in favor?
Aye.
That was a little quick. Meeting adjourned.
I think you are so right about
Oh.
that light. It has given me a headache. You hear me?
I was,
You think they put a new one in or
It
something?
happens to me
Oh my, it has given me a headache sitting here.
sometimes on a regular basis. Now, who's this lady walking out? I mean, she stayed for the